or the project office is here. I mean, I can if you want, but
I probably will actually.
No, that's right.
I'd like to call the September 20th, 2016 meeting of the Eden Prairie City Council to order. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a short announcement before we begin the formal part of our agenda. We have an open podium that's available to our residents every city council meeting. It meets if you want to discuss a formal issue from 6:30 on, and then at about 6:50, we welcome people individually to step up and speak before the council. If you wish to speak at the open podium portion, please contact the city manager's office at 952-949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, your phone number, and subject matter. That helps us be prepared to respond. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, then the mayor at that time will open the floor to unscheduled speakers. Open podium is not recorded or televised. If you have any questions about open podium, please contact the city manager's office. We have this evening a brief report of the Southwest LRT, which we've had many of these reports to us over the months and years. This one I find, well, depending on one's perspective on wanting or not wanting, nonetheless, the fact that I think it's going to be more promising now, I find this more exciting tonight to have a presentation based on the fact that we have some local funding that now at least seems to be secure. So, Mr. Getcho, do you want to introduce who we have to speak here from the Southwest LRT, and then we'll hear the brief presentation?
absolutely, Mayor and Council. We have from the Southwest Project Office, Metropolitan Council, Jim Alexander, director of this project. There's also other staff here as well, and the council in the workshop had an hour-long update on this project, but we also felt at the regular portion of the meeting we should have a short presentation on the status of this project as well.
Jim.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Making you, Mr. Getchow, can you hear me okay with that? As far as the volume?
No.
Or should I talk right into it? How's that? Maybe I should keep it really close.
Pull it up.
They can turn you up.
There you go.
They can turn you up as well.
Okay, we'll try that. I might lean into it then. So just have a short presentation for you tonight to talk about the project. As you did mention, Mr. Mayor, we are now 100% locally funded, so that's a good thing for the project, and we are moving things forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just our project readiness and touch on a few things on the construction contracts that we anticipate having for this project, and then get in a little bit on the right-of-way, focusing on Eden Prairie, and then talk a little bit about outreach and communications as we get into construction. So on that funding piece, this is our funding chart, if you will. So we have a total amount of $1.858 billion for the project estimate. As you can see, FTA is we're looking to pick up 50% of the funding from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and that's through a full funding grant agreement that I'll speak about in a moment. There's other pieces on the other side of the chart. On the right side involve our local funders, the County's Transit Improvement Board, CTIB, HICRA, the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
I was thinking get a little bit closer, yeah.
Okay.
It should turn you up from back in the back.
Maybe I can just hold on to it like that. Maybe will that work?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try that. So I don't have to
Thank
lean
you.
over. So we also have in-kind land, which Eden Prairie has a part in that with that city west easement that we've talked about in the past. And Hennepin County cities, that 23.7, the city has a piece in that as well. And you see the rest of it make up from the state and Met Council and CTIB with this certificates of participation. And that's the piece that really got secured in the last 30 days. And that's a kind of a bonding approach to make up the rest of that local funding. So in terms of milestones completed to date, we have now completed the environmental review process. That was a final environmental impact statement that the FTA had finalized in May of 2016, and then they also gave us, the Met Council, a record decision on the FEIS in July. And then finally, there's a determination adequacy that the Council does, the Met Council does, on the local side from the environmental. So the federal pieces are those 2 bullet points. The local is that determination adequacy. And then, as I spoke of the funding, we now have 100% of the local funding secured for the project. And we've also submitted an application for the project to get into the engineering phase of the New Starts project program. That's essentially it's just a phase that we have to get through before we get to the full funding grant agreement phase. So we anticipate getting into that phase in November timeframe. And we have 90% completed of engineering and design of the plans for this for civil systems and the operations and maintenance facility, which will be located in Hopkins. So as we look ahead for the project, as I mentioned, we are looking to get into the engineering phase with FTA in November of this year, and we're looking to complete our civil package for construction toward the end of the year, with anticipating going out for bid in the January timeframe. And then shortly after that, we'll submit our application to the feds for the full funding grant agreement. That will look to secure that other 50% that was on that left side of the pie chart. And we'll follow up in early second quarter of the plans for systems and OMF. And then we're looking to get that approval from FDA, essentially for them to sign on the dotted line that they're good for the other 50% of the project in July of 17. And then we'll be underway with construction later on in 17, carrying us into 2020. And we anticipate revenue service in the 2021 timeframe. So in terms of the various agreements we're looking to have with the city, we already have a few subordinate funding agreements. Those are SFAs for design work on these locally requested capital investments. There's one being considered, as I understand tonight, number 7, for some utility work that would be associated with the project. And then we're also looking at a public property transfer for that easement at City West. And then they'll follow with a locally requested capital investment SFA for construction of all those pieces we've been designing. So essentially, we'd be looking for the city to pay for the cost, but it would be incorporated in our civil package, so it would be under all one contract. And then we'll also anticipate looking at getting into an operations and maintenance agreement with the city as well. So in terms of the construction contracts, we have 5 main contracts on this project that we're looking to do, and the first 3 will be design, bid, build, and there's the civil package I spoke of, the systems, and I have a slide for that upcoming, what entails with that, and the operations maintenance facility. That's the facility that will house the vehicles that we're going to purchase under that last item, the light rail vehicles, and that will be located in Hopkins. And then the fare collection piece, that's for ticket vending machines and rail validators on the platforms. So in terms of the civil contract scope, we have 15 stations. There is 1 deferred, as we've talked about in the past. The Eden Prairie Town Center is, as we mentioned in the work session earlier today, that the city is looking to get some outside funding for that piece, and we're looking at the idea of hopefully incorporating that in the overall project as we get construction underway in that area. And we have 44 structures. This is probably one of the bigger challenges on this project. We have 29 new bridges. They're a mix of LRT bridges, some pedestrian and roadway and freight bridges, where pretty much the east part of the project we're engaged with freight rail along the corridor. We have 7 existing bridges that we'll be doing modifications to, and that's the type of essentially modifying the piers, for example, to make them crash-worthy, if you will, if they run alongside freight or LRT close by. And then 6 pedestrian tunnels and 2 cut-and-cover tunnels, one involving the city of Eden Prairie just as we go under 62 and make our way up into Minnetonka, and the second one is the Kenilworth Corridor tunnel located in Minneapolis. Overall, we have 110 retaining walls on the project, and the track you see there, overall, we're 14.5 miles in length. That's the track footage you see there. And then we have park and rides throughout the system program. There's 7 surface lots and 1 ramp at Southwest Station, where we're looking to build a 450 stall ramp that would co-join with the existing ramp at Southwest Transit's facility there. So the surface lots within Eden Prairie, we have programmed for 2 lots at City West, and at the Golden Triangle, and 1 at City West. So in terms of the systems contract, a lot of information here, but basically the systems contract is what makes the train operate. Is the communication pieces that are associated with the projects. There's a lot of kind of the brains behind the project, if you will. And so we have a lot of systems here. I know there's some questions about or just wanting to understand how safety and security are going to work. And I did mention in our work session that we'll be working closely with the city fire and police as we undertake more conversation on this project before we get into revenue service, and that'll be facilitated by a fire, life, safety, and security committee that we meet on a quarterly basis, and then it'll probably be ramped up as we get closer into construction and meeting monthly. That's how we handled our Central Corridor Green Line project and the Blue Line before that. So it's kind of our standard operating process to get the local communities dialed into our system. So a little bit about right-of-way. These are just to depict some of the areas that are critical from a schedule perspective. You see down at the bottom, Southwest Transit area is one of those, and we do see that we need to get an agreement put in place with Southwest Transit before we apply for that FFGA in early 17. So that's a critical piece. But we'll also be looking to start doing some work in that area shortly after we give a notice to proceed to our civil contractor in that July timeframe of next year. So regarding Eden Prairie proper, we have programmed 36 private parcels. There are 2 total acquisitions out of that, 29 partial acquisitions, and 10 temporary construction easements where we needed just temporarily during that mostly civil construction. And then we also have 3 public parcels. It's the easement I spoke of at City West, and there are 2 temporary construction easements, one located at Purgatory Creek Park and the other at the Water Tower. And finally, another public parcel, Southwest Transit, that I mentioned the agreement. In terms of the schedule, we'll start looking to do acquisitions, or at least making offers in October, probably the mid-range of October, and that activity will carry through into June of next year. So just a little bit about construction outreach and communications plan. We really want to kind of take on from where we left off with the Green Line project and carry those things that worked and some of the things that didn't work so well, fine-tune those so we can apply it to the extension project. But so it's really looking at lessons learned and getting feedback from how things were handled on the Blue and Green Line construction pieces, and looking to incorporate best practices from national large-scale public works projects. I was just out in New York City with an FTA workshop, and just got some nice points from how they handle construction in a very condensed area. And it's always good to see what other agencies are doing in terms of how they handle this type of outreach and getting the communication out to the public when under construction. Because I guess bottom line, it's just safe to say no one really likes construction. We want to try to get in and out as fast as we can, but there's going to be some disruption. And we try to get that communication piece out to everybody as efficiently as possible so they're not surprised and they're trying to go up one road and find it's closed, for example. So just looking at those best practices, and we will look to get a committee of community members as we undertake construction, so we can make sure we're dialed into the public as we do the various pieces of work. We have also outreach coordinators. James Makoviak is with our project office. He's dedicated to Eden Prairie and Minnetonka. And we also have planned a 24-hour construction hotline, and we'll have various meetings with property owners, business owners as well. Kind of similar to what we've been doing already. We'll likely have city folks. Dave Lindahl, for example, has accompanied us with many of those meetings we've had to date. We'll also hold public meetings and construction tours as needed, and look to have updates to the neighborhood. And we're looking at some tools through social media. Texting might be an option we're going to take a look at, but we'll definitely have things on our website and have ways to get the media out. I guess the thing is, the point I want to make here is just we'll be working closely with the city as we undertake construction here to make sure we're on the same page and we're communicating the same thing. So lastly, just real quick, we are holding a career fair on October 18th. We're looking to ramp up our staffing for this project. We have upwards of about 70 folks we're looking to hire, so we just like to put that little plug out there. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Appreciate you coming out both to our workshop but also this evening. Any questions from council? We, of course, heard this earlier this evening. So thank you. I just want to make a comment that most of the students, I think, in the audience tonight are seniors. So this light rail project, since it was in infancy, has been going on longer than you've been on this earth. And if you come back from college in 5 years, you should, and maybe live in this city, we hope you do, you'll have light rail. So by 2021, I think it's finally going to happen. That's pretty exciting. And I know that from all the studies of the millennial generation, which right now are about age 21 up through 35, it's a key component on a metropolitan area where they move, whether there's mass transit. And so the whole concept of having light rail in Eden Prairie, I think, will be a boon to our economic vitality in the years to come. So you'll get the chance to experience this when you're back from college. Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Getcho, I believe there's a donation tonight if you want to bring
Yes.
that before us.
I will turn this over to Mr. Lotthammer.
Thank you. This is a donation from Mrs. Sampson. As you know, the Sampson family donated the Art Center to us about 8 years ago now. And she and her family have continued to support both in their sentiment and visits and drop-ins and the promotion of some of our programs, but also financially as well. We've had a long history of using their donations and contributions towards things like kilns and potter's wheels and really those things that have made it into a premier art center within the Twin Cities area. So we really appreciate her continued support, and we'll continue helping to build the classes and also the drop-in portion of the art center.
Thank you, Mr. Lotthammer. Is there a motion to accept this really incredible donation, which is just in a long string of donations from the Sampson family? Is there a motion?
Move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $10,236.13 from the Sampson family for Art Center equipment.
Second.
Any, I doubt, but I'll give the opportunity. Any comments or questions you want on that? We'll vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Before we actually have a motion for the agenda, are there any items that you want to add or delete? And then we'll go ahead and make a motion for the amended agenda, if there is one. Then is there a motion to approve the agenda as is?
Move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's, I believe Robert's rules allows me to do this. Let me ask if there's any corrections or additions to either the workshop minutes or the City Council meeting, both held on September 6th. If not, let's have one motion for both minutes. Go ahead and make that motion to approve the both the workshop and the council meeting held on the 6th.
Move to approve the following council meeting minutes. The council workshop held Tuesday, September 6th, 2016, and the city council meeting held Tuesday, September 6th, 2016.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Usually for most students, if you get the chance to either be at a meeting or watch one, there are 5 of us up here. So it's actually not exactly funny, but we get the chance to have everyone say something regularly when we pass motions here. So now we're ready to move to the consent calendar, which is a process where we're able to clump together a lot of important but not needing individual conversation items, and so we put them together on a consent calendar. So any issues or questions you want to remove or raise about the consent calendar? Otherwise, we can take a motion.
I would move approval of items A through R on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the consent calendar say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. So we move to our first public hearing. In fact, our only tonight. It's the first reading of an ordinance. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You are correct. Our one public hearing tonight is related to first reading of an ordinance regarding floodplain regulations. The city, actually many cities, all in Hennepin County, received updated flood insurance maps, which then requires the city to update our floodplain regulations. So our Public Works Director, Robert Ellis, will provide a presentation on these changes, the ramifications, the effects, the impacts, and then we'll talk a little bit about the ordinance that we need to amend and the action that you're being asked to take tonight.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, council members. So, as Rick had mentioned, FEMA has been working on digitizing the flood insurance rate maps across the country. And what that really means is if you take a look at this exhibit, this is essentially our current floodplain maps. They're pretty crude. If you own a property, it's hard to tell if you're in the floodplain or out of the floodplain. Oftentimes you have to hire an engineer and a surveyor to make that determination. So knowing that that's been an issue since the inception of the program, FEMA has been digitizing. This is very helpful because now you can zoom in. This is a web-based application. You can go on, type in your address, and zoom in to find out if you're in the floodplain or not. And this is particularly of interest to lending institutions. They want to know if their mortgages are for properties that are in the floodplain or not in the floodplain. So they are in the process of completing all of Hennepin County's flood insurance rate maps. And so what that means to us is because we are participants in the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a benefit to our community, we are now required to adopt and recognize these maps and also to adopt regulations for floodplain development that are consistent with federal policy. So that's what you see tonight is the adoption of these maps, our firm maps, and also an update of our floodplain regulations. And all of this has to be done before November 4th. That's the deadline that FEMA has set. And cities that fail to do that before the deadline will be excluded from having properties within their boundaries participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And that's a big deal because if you're buying or selling a house from an institution, a lending institution that's federally backed or federally insured, they're going to require that you have flood insurance. And the only place to get it is through the program. So it's very critical that we do adopt these ordinances and recognize these new floodplain maps. So in looking at what's different, what's changed, because that's probably the first question you might be asking, for the most part, if we take a look at the floodplain maps, they're largely unchanged with the exception of the 9 Mile Creek area. So we have Riley Creek, Purgatory Creek, the Minnesota River are really the locations where you're going to find the floodplain, wherever you have standing or moving water.
Can you point those out on the map? Because if you were viewing this at home, I think it'd be impossible to read.
Yes, and unfortunately the map is too large to show, so I've actually got about 20 pages of the map, and this is just one section. And this demonstrates, this is the 9 Mile Creek area. The Minnetonka city limits is up here. 9 Mile Creek comes into Eden Prairie and then eventually crosses over into Edina. But for the most part, the area that changed in the flood insurance rate maps is along 9 Mile Creek. And that's because 9 Mile Creek Watershed District recently remodeled the 100-year floodplain, and FEMA incorporated that model into the flood insurance rate maps.
So, Robert, is it in red, though, to Kathy's point?
Yes.
So residents could come into City Hall and see that.
They could, and they could actually go online and see this. I believe Hennepin County is in the process of issuing a link to a website where you can type in your address, find out where you live. It'll zoom in and it'll show you if you're in the floodplain or not.
Do we plan to have this on our website?
We will. As soon as it's active, which should be in a matter of days or weeks, we will provide that link on our website as well. Now, what this map is showing, this isn't the official firm map. This map is a demonstration of properties that have come into the floodplain and properties that have come out of the floodplain based on that new modeling. So when you take a look at this, anything in green is something that today is in the floodplain, but once these are adopted is no longer in the floodplain. Anything in red is moving into the floodplain that isn't there today. So when we analyze all of these maps in Eden Prairie to find out what's the important part is structures in the floodplain. Your backyard can be in the floodplain, that's not an issue. Your parking lot can be in the floodplain, those aren't issues. It's the lending institution's care is the structure in the floodplain, because that's typically what's going to trigger the need for flood insurance. So when we analyze the entire city, we found 4 properties that today are not in the floodplain that with the new mapping would go into the floodplain. We've contacted those property owners to let them know, hey, you will be in the floodplain once these new maps are adopted. And here is some information on the flood insurance rate or the flood insurance program so that you can get insurance for that. We provided them that information, but at the end of the day, that's between them and their lending institution. They may not be required to get it. We always advise it's a good idea, because if you do get flooded and you don't have insurance, it's 100% out-of-pocket cost for the property owner. So, but at the end of the day, that's a private decision. The city doesn't get involved in who has to have flood insurance and who doesn't. We simply manage the program so that it's available should people decide to use it. So that's kind of with the maps. And like I said, Riley Creek, Purgatory Creek, Minnesota River, there were minor changes to the floodplain boundaries. Didn't affect structures. It was essentially shorelines migrating over the years, and so it's moved in a little, moved out a little bit. So mostly backyard issues. 9 Mile Creek is the one that had the more significant changes. With respect to the ordinances, the floodplain regulations that FEMA is also requiring us to adopt, they look a lot like our existing floodplain regulations. They have permitted uses and conditional uses for things that you can and can't build in the floodplain. So farming, parking lots, backyard play structures, golf courses, open spaces, and all of the accessory structures that go along with those. They're still allowed. They are today. They are with the new ordinance. The things that aren't allowed, of course, are any locations for people to sleep, so homes, any employment centers, and any high-risk, high-value properties that if it's in the floodplain, it's going to be very expensive to replace. Those things today aren't allowed. They're not allowed with the new ordinance. So at the end of the day, there isn't a lot that's changing with the ordinance, but they do require that we update it using their most recently approved federal code language. So with that, I think that gives a pretty good idea of what's being proposed tonight. I will say at the end of the day, this is a good thing. I think people should know, either existing property owners or prospective purchasers, where the floodplain exists, because it is a real risk. And so at the end of the day, having the maps and the information is good, and having restrictions on what you can and can't do in the floodplain. I think at the end of the day, it's a responsibility cities should undertake. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
So all we're doing is aligning with federal delineations at this point of floodplains.
Absolutely.
Council, any questions that you'd like to ask? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council about this ordinance amendment? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I would move to close the public hearing and approve the first reading of an ordinance amending City Code Section 11.45 relating to floodplain regulations.
Second.
Any further comment or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Now we move on to payment of claims. Before we actually ask for a motion, anyone have any questions or concerns about any of the items in the payment of claims? So is there a motion and a second? Then we'll have a roll call vote.
Move approval of payment of claims is submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Aho.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Acting Mayor Case.
Aye. So moving on, there were no reports of council members. I'll give you just a chance in case you thought of something. In the meantime, anybody have anything they'd like to share or talk about? Great. I guess that was a little fast. I'll pause my 3 seconds. Okay. Report of the city manager. We do have some incredibly good news. I was quite up and positive about this when it came out. It was just yesterday morning, I believe.
Yeah, that's right, Mayor and Council, yesterday. So it's not something that we could have put in the packet ahead of time. We did receive some good news yesterday, bright and early, 7 a.m. on Monday morning, that Money Magazine named Eden Prairie the second best city in the United States to live in. So that's a very positive.
You can clap at this. That's a cool one. Yeah.
And maybe a couple things to mention. I don't think a lot of people hear about or understand what Money Magazine does to create that ranking, that final ranking. There are 50 cities, I believe, that are ranked, and I just want to take a minute or two to explain that process and to mention as well that being named the number 2 city yesterday builds upon a previous ranking of number 3. We were the number 3 ranked city 4 years ago, and then 6 years ago we were number 1. So I believe we're the only city that has been 1, 2, or 3 in at different ranking times within the last 6 years.
In the whole country.
The whole country.
That's
in the
incredible.
whole country. So speaking of the whole country, Mayor, in this process, and it does change over time, the system they use, the process they use, but at least in the case of 2016, they took each and every city, which is about 820 cities, between the populations of 50,000 and 300,000. So it's not every single city, but it's cities within that range. They do smaller cities under 50,000 in a different year. That would have been last year. Chanhassen, actually, our neighbor to the west, was ranked in the top 10 as a small city under 50,000. And from that, they look at about 300,000 different demographic or data analytics to get down to 500 cities. And then they further analyze the details in each community. In this case, this year, with Eden Prairie, they got down to 200. Eden Prairie was among 200 cities, where then they analyzed the city's local economy, their jobs, looking for low tax rates, property tax rates, access to health care, strong public schools, access to local sports and culture, and that brought them down to 100 cities after that analysis. Then they do a geographic balance, and this is somewhat new. They limit their ranking to 1 city per county. So we're in Hennepin County. So in previous years, you may have seen other Hennepin County cities in the ranking, but they only allow 1 city per county and then 4 per state. I think Minnesota was actually starting to dominate their top 50. I think there was a time when there were close to 10 cities in Minnesota in the top 50. So that's a positive reflection of the state of Minnesota. Then they visit 50 cities. They actually go to 50 cities and they spend quite a bit of time touring the city, talking to city staff members, elected officials, interviewing residents, going to community locations, going to businesses, going to schools, and spending quite a bit of time in the community. And then from there you get your top 50 ranking. And we are very proud to be number 2 in the United States.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to just share a comment that was off of Money Magazine's website yesterday morning. You can go out and read this yourself, but I thought since I had this opportunity, this again reads almost like a marketing advertising tool for us, and yet it's Money Magazine. It's pretty amazing. This is what they say about us. Eden Prairie has appeared on Money's Best Places list several times and finished number 1 in 2010. One reason for its success, the economy. Several large employers, including Optum, C.H. Robinson, Starkey, and SuperValue, have their headquarters here. Though Eden Prairie has only 62,000 residents, it is home to 57,000 jobs, and it has a downright skimpy 3.6% unemployment rate. So it's a great place when you graduate from college and come back for the LRT line to come back and live here and get a job. And your parents would like that anyway. Thanks to its, We hope, right? Thanks to its low debt and diversified tax base, the city has earned a AAA bond rating from Moody's every year since 2003. The local economy will likely get another boost in the next few years with the extension of the Southwest Light Rail line that will connect the city to downtown Minneapolis. True to its name, Eden Prairie has invested in its outdoor splendors as well. The city contains 37 parks, 17 lakes, 200 miles of sidewalks and trails. In a 2014 Quality of Life survey of Eden Prairie conducted by the city, 95% of our residents gave the hometown good or excellent ratings. That seal of approval is for more than just amenities. It also reflects residents' appreciation of what their neighbors offer to each other. Quote, Eden Prairie attracts a very diverse crowd, says Amanda, whose daughter Naya is enrolled in Spanish immersion daycare. We love living in a community that reflects the world we live in. You may be wondering who else won this. Columbia, Maryland. I spent last week out there with United Health Group with my job. So I spent the entire week in the number 1 and number 2 cities in the country. I like Columbia, but I think I like Eden Prairie a lot better. Eden Prairie is number 2. Plano, Texas, number 3. West Des Moines, Iowa, number 4. Parsippany? I don't even know. Troy, if you can't pronounce a name, how could they win? Troy Hills, New Jersey was number 5, and Highlands Ranch, Colorado was number 6. So just to underscore what Mr. Getchell said, they analyzed 60 factors, and we came out number 2 on all those factors. That's incredible. I mean, I feel really proud to be part of a city council that has really helped to lead this, but we have amazing staff, 300 people led by Mr. Getchell, and our residents are absolutely incredible, our students particularly going to our schools. So we have a great place to live. Let's just all get up and give a hug and do a Kumbaya song. I just am feeling very positive at the moment. So thank you for that. I think we are really toward the end. Is there any other business to come before the council this evening? I just really hate to send these students home after only 34 minutes, but I think we're going to have to. If you want to come up and chat with us about anything, you can. So is there a motion to move to adjourn the September, 20th City Council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming tonight.
Ron, you missed some.